All right, let's get a view on the possible meaning of this outpouring today. We're joined in studio by the Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis. Thank you for being with us.
Good.
So you were marching in Pretoria. Just tell me about your experience.
Well, you know, I thought it was a fantastic day. I would. There were a lot of people there. It was a very representative group of people, which is very important. I mean, this can't be smeared as a sort of white middle class march. It was a demographically, probably the most demographically sort of accurately representative crowd of people that I've seen. And I think it transmitted a very strong message. If I were worried about electoral outcomes, I would look at this and think about my prospects very closely. And I hope the ANC sees the dissatisfaction, the rampant dissatisfaction that there is with their current leadership.
Can we really say, though, that South Africans are rejecting their president, looking at the numbers? Were there enough, I guess?
Well, what is enough, you know? I think, you know, the figure I've heard about Pretoria is 35,000. I heard a figure of about 50,000 in Cape Town. There was the DA march. I don't know how many people supported that. There were also a very pleasing part of today is that there were little community protests, like on Baysnordia Bridge at Drive at you know, early this morning, outside the Gupta's compound there. So, you know, there were a lot of people, you know, and you know, 100,000 people, let's say, across the country. There was apparently quite a well-supported march in Durban. You know, eventually 100,000 becomes 500,000, and 500,000 becomes 1 million. Ask the former Brazilian president, and I'm sure she will bear that out.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We've seen marches in Brazil, in Venezuela, but we haven't had a marching culture, really, have we? And,
well,
could that be changing?
We used to.
I guess we did.
Really used to, under very difficult circumstances. I think I think the government had better start getting used to it. I mean, remember, 100,000 people in South Africa is about 500,000 people in Brazil, population-wise. So I wouldn't lay a lot of store by numbers, and I certainly wouldn't take any comfort by it, because I think that today, you know, and I saw a briefing of the security cluster, even they seem to acknowledge that people were out today, and people were expressing their dissatisfaction in no uncertain terms.
You mentioned the Gupta home, and I'd like to ask you, it seems a bit threatening to go and stand outside somebody's house. You know, they are maybe youngsters, things like that. But is that fair enough as an expression, given the controversy around this family?
Well, I think it is. I mean, they've come to symbolize venality and corruption and the whole question of state capture, and not without evidence. You know, there is the Public Protector's report. There is the starting with the Waterkloof Air Force Base. And then culminating in the Public Protector's voice. There is plenty good reason for objecting to the conduct of the Guptas. There's no doubt about it. But you know, what is of more concern is the fact that those who are meant to check the likes of the Guptas are complicit clearly with them, and that's what our real problem is, and the problem that I think those marches in Cape Town, Durban, Johannesburg, Pretoria were trying to resolve today.
So David, one of the concerns is corruption, your domain, and I'd like to ask you where you think we are. Fitch today suggesting some concern about the cabinet reshuffle, that it may mean the nuclear deal goes quickly. It didn't suggest there could be payoffs, but it's concerned. How pivotal was that cabinet reshuffle? And how are we looking in terms of corruption as a country, say, compared to a year ago?
We're not looking great. You know, the cabinet reshuffle for the likes of Fitch and the ratings agencies, and they talk in sort of code in the language of their profession. They speak about governance issues and the like.
Still being pretty
but they mean
explicit
corruption.
Today,
They mean corruption.
And there is a big question mark around the nuclear deal.
And you know, not only is there a big question mark around the nuclear deal, but quite clearly the Deputy Minister and Minister of Finance were vital factors that had to be removed in order to get the nuclear deal through. And I think the current Minister of Finance had better tread extremely carefully if he doesn't want to vindicate the view that what he was put in position was precisely to do somebody's bidding around the nuclear deal. And the interests in the nuclear deal are absolutely clear. And I have to tell you, they include the Guptas as well. You know, their uranium mine, which they've recently acquired, stands to gain very substantially from the nuclear deal.
So how concerned are you? I was listening to radio today and people were phoning in, somebody from elsewhere in Africa saying we've seen this before and we're warning you, South Africa is on the slippery slope. How quickly does it happen? How does the decline happen? How worried are you? How quickly can we come back if we want to?
Well, I think that's the importance of today. You know, in the last year we've seen allegations, very powerful allegations of state capture of Eskom, South African Airways, the SABC, the South African Social Security Agency, Denel, and now the Treasury. What comes next? The Reserve Bank. You know, where are we going to on this? And I think that, you know, what today you saw was a line drawn. And, you know, people will be surrounding those institutions to prevent them from being captured. And they will start to push back on the other institutions. You know, we're thinking of litigation in relation to the Eskom issue. Others are working on the South African Airways issue. And so there is a real fight back coming, because I think there is cause to be worried. You know, I don't know where this sort of famous tipping point is, but there is one. And, you know, I know in the international corruption indices, when you see what is below us, there are really places you don't want to go to. And we're not by any means the worst in the world. But as I say, about 10 or 15 places below us, there you will reach a position where it is going to be very difficult to turn around the situation.
Final question then. There was even unhappiness among the top 6. They didn't like President Jacob Zuma's decision. So presumably, if he's not listening to them, how much of an effect can this public action really have? Can today make a difference?
Well, he's not listening to them, but he's not kicking them out either, which is, to me, I mean, the glass half full kind of syndrome. You know, he's having to live with 3 members of his top 6 having called for him to be fired. People in his cabinet definitely want him to be fired. People in the NEC want him to be fired. People in Parliament want him to be fired. And he can't do anything about them. So right at the moment, they may not be strong enough to remove him, but he sure as hell is not strong enough to remove them. And so maybe there's a temporary sort of stalemate, but I think maybe today's actions might have told people where the public stood on this issue, and that I go into the weekend feeling very good about.
All right, on that note, thank you very much, Executive Director of Corruption Watch, David Lewis.